This program is brought to you by Bible Way Media, overseen by the elders of the Chipman Road Church of Christ in Lee Summit, Missouri.
I cannot imagine the chaos. I mean, I see the reports and on the news and I see the long, seemingly never-ending lines as people stare at their phones, hunkered over their luggage in hand, waiting impatiently and impatiently to go through the TSA line. I'm not traveling this week. Well, many are trying to get to a stress-free destination for spring break. I mean, that's not me. I'm beyond that. And I'm glad I'm not one of those passengers or the TSA agents. So I wasn't paying that much attention to all of that, other than enough to hear how bad it was and sigh a moment of relief that I'm not required to fly right now this week, until the short interview caught my attention. Her voice was so sweet, it made me pause as I walked through the living room with the television on. I stopped and I watched the reporter hold a microphone up to her face. She seemed a little shy, but honestly, she wasn't upset and she wasn't angry when the reporter asked her how she was doing. She was polite and said, "I'm doing fine. I mean, it isn't easy, but I'll be okay." The reporter asked about her paycheck, the one she was not getting, and how she was handling that. I think he was pushing her, you know how they are. He was pushing her to say something that he could use, that could make a good soundbite, something horrible. But no, she just smiled and she continued. When he said, "So what about your bills? I mean, how are you going to handle not being paid in the middle of the shutdown? You're working without pay and others aren't showing up for work, but you are. You're having to take on extra shifts without pay." And he asked that question. "How does that make you feel?" And she said, "I'm fine. I mean, it means that I have to make choices about my bills, but I always do. And I may have to put some bills on the credit card, but these people need to get where they need to go. They depend on us. And I trust that this will end. And I'll get paid. I'm not worried." And that was that. She smiled sweetly as the reporter kept staring at her and then turned back to the camera and interpreted her answer that did not represent her calm demeanor. Now, I've never been an essential worker. My jobs have always been, non-essential, a teacher, an administrator. So I never had to think about or make a choice about doing my job even if I didn't get paid. Now, I think that that's most of us. Maybe. I mean, we do the job and we get the paycheck. Not a promise of a paycheck like that sweet TSA worker's doing, and so many others are doing right now, holding on and trusting on a promise of a paycheck tomorrow. Yeah, I think that maybe become a society, or I don't know, evolved into generations that expect the payment now. And when it doesn't come now, well, then what? Sometimes we just quit. I recall years ago with the idea of instant gratification, or that phrase, everybody was using, that was tied to like this microwave and fast food, that we just put something in and we expect it to happen right away, that we've lost our ability to be patient, that we want what we want and we want it now. And I understand that, but it wasn't until recently when I saw those long lines of impatient people who wanted what they want being helped by a sweet lady that wasn't getting what she deserved now, but only held on to a promise and did her job so nicely because she trusted that she would get what she deserved eventually, even though it would mean making hard choices now. And as I listened to her, the words of the Hebrew writer, came to mind. And all of these, having gained approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 39. That Hebrew writer was referring in that phrase to the women who received back their dead, who had died in the faith, and the faithful who were sawn in two, and others who were mocked and put to death by the sword, and so much more. That theme of trusting that promise, it began in the beginning when God gave his judgment to Adam and Eve in chapter 3 of Genesis. and it was handed to Abram in Genesis chapter 15, and Jacob declared it in his sons in his prophecy in chapter 49 of Genesis in verse 18, where he said, "For your salvation I wait, O Lord." And they did. They waited, generation after generation, with only a promise that it would all work out, as they brought their sacrifices to be offered on their behalf year after year, generation after generation, prophet after prophet, declaring that the Messiah would come, that God's promised in time and at the right time. But they had the same problem that we have: trust and perhaps patience. But I don't know, I think it was different for them, living on that side of the divide, the old law, the promise of a promise. And that's what makes our faith so much more significant for me. You see, they didn't see what we see. They didn't know or have the opportunities that we have. They were looking towards salvation, hoping for their salvation. As the psalmist says in chapter 119, verse 166, they were waiting and hoping and trusting on that God would do what he said. And we live in a time when he did. And here we are, living here where they could not be, could not go, with salvation here delivered. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 21. But we wait too, don't we, for something else, just like they did, stepping out into our world every day, not knowing what is ahead in any moment, but trusting, making the right choices, which steps to take, which steps not to take, that we can calmly face anything. What may seem uncertain to others may seem certain to us. What may appear to be a situation that would upend our lives, it doesn't faze us. What may seem like a stressful time that steals our peace, oh, it just doesn't. Because we know that we can trust the promise, no matter how long we have to wait. And it is for this that I bow my knees with you today, grateful for the promise and the peace that trusting gives our hearts and our minds and our souls while we wait.
We thank you for joining us today. We hope you have enjoyed this program. You can find out more about Byway Media by visiting us at bywaymedia.org. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find all of our podcasts on all major podcast platforms. As always, we thank you for listening.